Good morning, and welcome to Manitoba Agriculture's webinar addressing automation and technology skill gaps in agriculture. My name is Bill Resnichuk. I'm the Industry Development Specialist for Labor with Manitoba Agriculture, and I would like to start this webinar by acknowledging that in Manitoba, we're gathered on Treaty 1 territory, and that Manitoba is located on the treaty territories and ancestral lands of the Anishinabeg, Anishinaabe, Dakota Ayete, Dene Sulene, and Nehitawak nations. We acknowledge Manitoba is located on the homeland of the Red River Métis, and we acknowledge northern Manitoba includes lands that were and are the ancestral lands of the Inuit. We respect the spirit and intent of treaties and treaty making and remain committed to working in partnership with First Nations, Inuit, and Métis people in the spirit of truth, reconciliation, and collaboration. As the Industry Development Specialist for Labor with Manitoba Agriculture, my role is to support industry stakeholders to address labor challenges and identify opportunities to grow Manitoba's agriculture sector through developing a skilled workforce. For this webinar, technology and automation are reshaping Manitoba's agriculture and food processing sectors. With that comes a need for a workforce with the necessary skills to support the development, adoption, use, and maintenance of these new technologies. In some cases, this means companies are hiring individuals that may not have seen their careers leading into the agriculture sector. And in other cases, this means expanding the skill set of individuals currently working in the sector. Today, this webinar will feature 3 agriculture industry professionals highlighting how their organizations are identifying and addressing the labor and skills challenges related to technology adoption in the agriculture sector. We have Lisa Ashton, Director of Policy Lead for RBC Thought Leadership, Chris Badusky, Interim Dean of the Russ Edwards School of Agriculture at Assiniboine College in Brandon, Manitoba, and Gary Bond, Branch Manager of Enns Brothers in Portage La Prairie, Manitoba. So why don't we start off just by each of you, I just introduced you, but give a little background on your organizations and kind of how it plays into the theme of the webinar and technology adoption. Lisa, why don't we start with you?
Sure. Thanks, William. Hi, everyone. My name is Lisa Ashton, and I have the opportunity to lead the agriculture and food portfolio at RBC Thought Leadership. RBC Thought Leadership is a think and do tank that operates at arm's length from the business. We're very involved, but in order to produce independent research and to really engage with stakeholders, we do operate at that arm's length. And the purpose of our institute is really to focus on Canada's prosperity. And so we look at that from a number of different themes, including human capital, productivity, trade, and climate and sustainability. And across those themes, agri-food is a priority sector for our institute, and then it is also a priority sector for our BC. So that's why we're very engaged within the sector, digging into real challenges and real solutions that affect the industry, like the skills and talent gap that we're going to talk about today, and really trying to set up the next generation of agriculture to grow and be also global leaders, not only in production but across productivity, innovation, and sustainability as well.
Perfect. Thanks, Lisa. Chris, yourself?
Sure. So Chris Badusky, Interim Dean here at the Russ Edwards School of Agriculture and Environment, which is within the Assiniboine College here in Brandon, Manitoba. And I've got a long storied history starting from the private sector, public sector, and now with post-secondaries. And really, the college has a long history as well in supporting agriculture and producing graduates to support the industry's success. And over time, we've really recognized and acknowledged that technology is becoming more and more the forefront of agriculture. Agriculture is often an early adopter of innovation and technology, and the skill sets are changing. So we've been on a bit of a growth and expansion kick, working towards our new project, the Prairie Innovation Center for Sustainable Agriculture, and that's growing our programming in areas of technology that will support agriculture and agri-food sciences, growing our core agriculture programs and our environmental programs that also support it. So We're really invested in historically in providing uh, graduates and labor market skills to support the industry's growth, but even more so going forward as we've always said we're Manitoba's Ag College, and we're really doubling down on that. So, thank you for including us today.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for joining. And Gary.
Oh, good morning. My name is Gary Bone. I'm the branch manager for Enns Brothers in Portage Prairie. We're a John Deere dealership. Our company has 9 locations across Manitoba. For 7 of my 14 years, I was managing both the Portage Prairie and Brandon locations. So work a lot with the technician side of things. I've worked with agriculture in the classroom in Manitoba and the local schools. So we develop people here. We believe in developing youth and training them right through till journeyman and then beyond. So not only we went through the apprenticeship program, we develop youth, but also we've kind of become a bit of an ag classroom where we teach students about agriculture and how their food is grown. But also there's so many opportunities in agriculture that most people don't understand that's out there for them. So appreciate having the opportunity to speak today, and I'm looking forward to our conversations.
Perfect. Thanks for joining us, Gary. So on that note, before we jump into the questions to the panelists and start that discussion, I'm actually going to start by reaching out to the audience here. At the bottom of your bar, you should have a Q&A box. And we have a question kind of to get the conversation going is, as Gary said, people don't know about all the opportunities in agriculture. So when you think of careers related to technology and automation in agriculture and food processing, what are some of the jobs that come to mind? And feel free to put your answers in the Q&A box there. And while that's getting populated, I think we can only see it on our end, but while that's getting populated, Lisa, why don't we start with you? RBC's Next Generation of Growth report identified the important role of technology in Canada's agriculture industry, both domestically and internationally. Can you explain what drove the need for RBC to create this report, and specifically as it relates to identifying the shrinking skill gap?
Yeah, absolutely. So, for those that haven't had a chance to look at the report and the work that is surrounding our efforts on next generation of agriculture, the report really tried to dig into how Canada is doing on agri innovation from the perspective of research and development, skills and talent, and commercialization. And I hope there's lots of folks within the agri-food sector here, but also outside. And I hope we all can all agree agri-food in Canada is really a global leader. But what we have found recently, especially over the last 10 years, is that we are slipping on some key trends, particularly around investment in agri-food tech, challenges around the R&D environment, and ecosystem in terms of the number of actors and the amount of funding going into R&D for agriculture, and happy to go into the details of that as well. But specifically to skills and talent, and kind of the focus of this conversation is that there are tons of opportunities. I think Gary mentioned that, within the agricultural sector that are high tech, that are business orientated. But with our Canada population and only 1.6% of that population having a farming background, there's fewer and fewer people that are directly exposed to that when they're being raised, whether they have that direct family connection or another connection in some other way. There's fewer and fewer people that understand kind of the robotics in barns and the sensors that are being used on across soils. And so that came up in conversations that we've been having, particularly in Manitoba over the last several months, as we scoped out an investment into the agricultural sector in the province. RBC made a $5 million investment in October to the next generation of agriculture in the province. And skills and talent was a key theme that kept coming up that we really needed to be focused on. So that's why we explored this research and why skills and talent is one of three pillars of that investment, where we're investing in hackathons and micro credentials to better connect agricultural students, but also non-agricultural students to industry and to more experiential learning opportunities that help them expose them to the skills that are required in the sector. And happy to go into more detail, but I would say that the reason why we've engaged in this topic and why we're engaged in the sector is because through a lot of our engagement with industry, we're hearing that there's more and more demand for action on exposing more people to the agricultural career opportunities, but then also ensuring that we're preparing the students that are entering the agricultural workforce have the right skills and are really actually job ready. And I think what Chris is doing at Assiniboine College is a perfect example of that as well.
Excellent. Thank you, Lisa. And that's actually a perfect segue into, a question for you here, Chris. Assiniboine College, as you mentioned in your introduction there, is an important institute for agriculture skills training here in Manitoba. And when we talk about agriculture skills training, whether it's at Assiniboine College or other institutes or training programs, we often hear the terms, ag tech, digital ag, advanced manufacturing, mechatronics, used to describe some of the technologies in agriculture and the food processing sector. Can you explain how Assiniboine College, maybe differentiates between these different terms when training individuals to work in these sectors? And can you give some examples of how technologies differ or may be similar between the agriculture and food processing sectors?
Yeah, I think often these terms are thrown around and intermixed, and sometimes rightfully so. And the ability to distinguish between them changes depending on who the audience is or who's speaking, what sector is being involved. So really, from a college perspective, we're trying to provide skill sets to students so that when they graduate, they can maybe not necessarily have a laser focus on a particular position, but they have breadth and an understanding of concepts so that they're employable for many employers across the province and the prairies and the sectors. So on a broad base, I mean, a term like digital agriculture for us really drives on a data-driven approach. So here we're talking, acquisition of data, trying to understand the difference between good data and bad data, manipulating that data, using that data to create communications to a client, and how you do that in ways of storyboards and interactive maps. And so this relates very well to area more perhaps traditional areas like precision agriculture and GIS and how we do those kind of activities. Agricultural technology or ag tech is a really broad thing that really is potentially all encompassing. That's your hardware platforms. It could be your tractor and your baler. It could be the systems and the platforms inside of it, or the interoperability between them. It can be, just about anything you want it to be. So ag technology is a bit of a catch-all, and I guess we just really don't latch onto that one as much because we want to maintain partnerships and the ability to be flexible. And case in point, to Gary's credit, we actually had a guest speaker on campus yesterday from Enns Brothers, and they were in the classroom speaking to how John Deere's platform is driving efficiencies on a farm operation. So that platform is a technology, but it's also a digital ag tool. And so we find that, there's the opportunity to distinguish them in some cases, but quite often they can be intermixed and they are applicable. So for that, a little bit maybe different as we move into the food processing sectors and other areas of lighter advanced manufacturing. The advanced manufacturing is a bit of a catch-all perhaps too, where, it's how you get the manufacturing done, and it incorporates many different aspects, from traditional manufacturing to 3D printing and everything in between. Whereas the mechatronics is a component of it. It's really how you program it, how you feed the sensors. It's this mixture of mechanical, electrical, and computer science, so that you're really working with sensors, feeding signals, and again data acquisition, to create a manufacturing process. So you're doing design and creation, and the output of that is a manufacturing process. And that's really where we're trying to, in the case of our new mechatronics program, set up students for success to graduate out of that to feed value added sectors in certainly food processing, light manufacturing, nutraceuticals, biomedical, et cetera. There's a high demand for technicians in that area as well. So that's a bit of a long-winded answer, maybe, but hopefully it kind of drives the conversation forward.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think it's good to give some context to some of these terms because, as you said, some of them we do throw around a little bit, and it gives context when we're talking about the skills and even the industries that they apply to. Gary, so for you as an employer, has changing technologies in the ag equipment industry specifically changed the way Enns Brothers provides and operates from a labor perspective, and how do you provide service to clients?
Absolutely, it's changed. Agriculture sector technology has advanced more rapidly than many sectors out there. I'll give you a few examples. Like if you look at old technology, GPS guided equipment has been around for over 20 years. That's old technology to us. We've got equipment that can go up and down a field without steering the equipment within a half an inch of guidance. And like I said, that's old technology. Here's a couple of examples of some new technology. One that's in market right now and one that's close is we use AI technology with machines that can identify the difference between a weed from a plant and the different types of weeds and treat them accordingly. In the time it takes you to blink your eye, this machine has identified and delivered on 300,000 plants. And in 3 years from now, John Deere will be releasing an autonomous tractor, and you're going to operate that tractor with your phone. So for sure, labor is shifting from more manual tasks to more technology focused, both for our company and our customers. Here's some examples of some tools that we use today. Our technicians and our technology support staff, can remotely connect into machines right from their home or their office. They often can resolve issues and change settings remotely. This saves the customer time and money, not waiting for someone to drive out to the field. We receive alert codes from equipment that are wirelessly sent to our dealership or right to your laptop or cell phone that allows us to bring parts out to the customer on our first trip. In the past, a technician would drive out, diagnose, and then they would make a second trip back with parts and then do the repairs. So, there's so many examples of technology in the ag equipment today. And, John Deere, it takes 10 years for it to get to market. So, See and Spray, which is the AI technology with the sprayer, that was in development 10 years ago, and it just came to market last year. So, yeah, so I think I'll leave it off there, Bill.
Yeah.
I totally
Yes.
echo that. And it's like we started with light bars on the sprayers.
Mhm.
And now you're getting down to, all these microprocessors making algorithmic decisions for you.
Right.
It's leaps and bounds.
Yeah, and I think the next question I talk a little bit about that shift. You think about the technology where, even for a farmer, they have people in seats of equipment operating, where in the future, you're going to have more people working with tech and less people doing those manual labor.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Lisa, did you want to add anything to that from the next generation of growth report perspective?
Yeah, I would just add like from our research on that in terms of there's this massive shift of automation and introducing disruptive technologies like Gary and Chris have mentioned. But I think within the Canadian context, when you then apply that to training of students and who has that knowledge and who's bringing it into the agri-food sector, we are seeing some challenges. And I'll give you one example. When we look at those key services that influence the agricultural sector, like policy, computer science, and data management, even finance specialists. The people with an agricultural background, so have some sort of post-secondary degree or even micro-credential, those that have that agricultural background that are then going into careers that are really influencing agriculture, like policy data, like I mentioned, it's less than 1.5% of Canadians with those agricultural degrees that are going into those professions. So you're hearing a lot about kind of John Deere. We're seeing a lot of that technology come from the US and from other countries. And so I think when we think about Canada's talent pool, there's a real opportunity and kind of to what Chris was mentioning around breadth is bridging more students and more learners that have both an agricultural background, but then also have those skills in maybe robotics or different types of engineers so that they are actually applying those highly technical skills to the agricultural sector. So we are seeing some gaps there, and I think that's kind of really where our focus is going towards.
Perfect. No, I think that's a really important context to give there. So before we move on to kind of the next section of this webinar where we start to talk about skills a bit more, I'll just go through some of the answers that we got from that first question to the audience about what jobs do people associate when we're talking about technology and automation in agriculture. Some examples: precision ag specialists, software engineer, heavy machine operators, machinists, mechanics, GIS specialists, sales and marketing, data analysts, tech analysts. No policy analysts on there yet, Lisa. Precision technology support, machine learning. So really technology focused. And I think to Lisa, to your last point there, right, it does go beyond some of those really technology focused professions as well.
When you think about policy, just the autonomous tractor, like the legislation around that would be huge. Like, we're not just going to let a tractor drive down the highway going from field to field, unoperated. So there's going to be a lot around that policy when we get to these new technology tools coming.
Yeah, absolutely. So again, before we move on to the next section here, I'm going to pose another question to the audience based off, what you've just heard and your existing knowledge of technology and automation in agriculture. When you think of the skills required, we talked about some of the roles, but when you think about the skills required related to technology and automation in agriculture and food processing, what skills come to mind? And again, I'll let the chat fill up, and then we can move on. So this is the next question. Will be Gary and Chris. How has advancements in technology changed the skills required for individuals to work in the ag sector? And have certain occupations been more affected than others? Gary, we can start with you.
Okay. Yes, for sure. I would say the technician or technology support staff would be mostly the change there. Like a technician's job has really evolved from all mechanical from over 20 years ago to more of a technical focus. There's less wrench turning work and more diagnosing computers, electronics, and controllers. Skills needed today are like strong math, critical thinking, and problem solving, where basically it's an analytical mindset to be a technician. You're chasing voltages and wiring, and we don't even rebuild engines anymore. They all come as a remanufactured engine from the factory, and yeah, they have to unbolt it and take it out and put the other one in. But in the past, it was tearing the engine down, rebuilding it, and so that's really a big shift that we're seeing. Also we have technology support staff, which is a position that we created to address the advancements in technology and how it is integrated into the equipment. The technology is too advanced for most customers, and they rely on us heavily for support. And so the two occupations that have changed the most are the technology support and the technician, as those are the positions most closely related to technology. When you look at the technician, we have an apprenticeship program through Apprenticeship Manitoba, where they go through 4 levels of training at ACC. They get their journeyman. Their learning has just begun. The technology is so advanced that learning is lifelong in this field. And we've actually been working to try and have a learning path for technology support people, because it's really not recognized as a trade, but we feel that there's a need for that because we feel we're going to have more of these support people. Just as the technology gets more advanced, our customers are going to need us even more to make it work, so that equipment's doing the right process in the field, and that precision planting is done perfectly, so that when we're planting, the seed is put in the right space, in the right depth. And when it's put in the ground perfectly, that's when we get the most yield and productivity out of that equipment. So to summarize, those are the two positions that we have at a John Deere dealership that are definitely most affected.
Perfect. Chris?
I think Gary certainly covered, that aspect of the industry quite well, and I'll kind of keep going from there. And especially on the crop side is, traditionally we're looking at agronomists and sales people, and they're working with producers in the field. But now we're actually looking at using artificial intelligence on identifying plant identification or diseases or nutrient deficiencies to supplement that human resource expertise and eventually perhaps replace it. So, that's going to be a disruptor down the road. We're looking at customer relation databases. So now you're not just talking about, digital ag being a technology, but it's a relationship management system. Who sold what to whom? What are the rotations and the pesticides being used? And using all this information as data to make comprehensive and informative decisions, so that you're providing the best advice to your clients. That's all part of it. And that's just on the crop science. We now look at, let's move to animal husbandry. And we're talking about these controlled environments in both like dairy barns and hog barns, et cetera. They're automated environments where the feed, the water, the ventilation is all automated controls, covered cultivation units, vertical farms, greenhouses. As we learn the hard way that we want a little bit more robustness in our food security systems, all these kind of systems are heavily integrated with digital agricultural technologies, and we need technicians to support them. And they're not your traditional romantic, pitchfork and red barn imagery. It is computer science. It is programmable logic controllers, and being able to diagnose these systems on different platforms. So what covers it all, the breadth, going back to the breadth approach, what are the skill sets that we really need in the sector as we try to catch up and maybe innovate again, is it's some of these transversal skills around, can you problem solve? Can you critical think? Can you communicate and work with clients? So we often hear all of our programs are very responsive to industry, and we always get industry feedback as to how we're doing and where we're needing to spend a bit more time and energy. And quite often it's not as much on the technical, because the technical will get them to a certain point, and then they need to focus or drill down on a employer by employer basis. But the students and the new employees need to really understand how to do these critical thinking processes, the way to communicate or ask questions and not be shy, learn by doing, and take those skills from the dairy barn and the robotic milker to the feed mill or the pneumatics that are in a fertilizer plant, and transfer them across. very few people nowadays stay in the same industry more than 4 or 5, maybe 10 years at a time, and they're jumping around. And those skills need to work whether you're working for Enns Brothers or you're working for Nutrien or you're working for a credit union trying to understand who's got the best lending portfolios. So that's I think where we really land is trying to get some of these foundational skills around um, comfort around problem solving, diagnostics, critical thinking, communications, professionalism, etc. So I took
Perfect.
that in a very different direction, but
No, but I think it's important again when we talk about the transferable skills across sectors or across areas of the agriculture sector, and that it does align with a lot of that problem solving, critical thinking, um, collaboration, those elements of that skills. Lisa, does the RBC's report have anything to add to that skills conversation?
No, I think Gary and Chris certainly covered it, and I think it's really interesting to think about these transferable skills within the agricultural sector and the social side of things being something that colleges and universities and maybe not just social side, but the more softer skills in terms of problem solving, critical thinking, and really honing in on those and working with industry for the more technical side of things. I think that's certainly kind of what we're seeing and interesting to hear Chris and Gary say that.
I think too,
Perfect.
one of the other things we've come across from industry is that because there's so few people dedicated to kind of putting a career trajectory into the agricultural realm, is that they're recruiting from outside of that to fill these roles, and so they are hiring often people with no agricultural background, but they still have the technical skills in computing or engineering or what have you, finance, but they don't quite understand the lingo or the language or the environment of the sector. And now we're actually getting some feedback from industry that we need to take these people with zero background or next to zero background and give them a little bit of an introduction to agricultural fundamentals so that they can understand the difference between a steer and a heifer and a combine and a swather, and how that actually may help them do informed decision making when they're working on as an IT specialist or a financial lender. So sometimes it's almost 180 degrees.
Perfect. No, I think that's definitely an important point when we recognize that we're going to need skills that don't necessarily come from an agriculture background as well. Lisa, what role do institutions such as RBC's Thought Leadership Group play in addressing skills gap? And has RBC identified any opportunities to address the skills gap identified through the report?
Yeah, Chris actually set me up quite well for that. So, in terms of kind of meeting industry demand of having kind of that crossover with a little bit of understanding of the egg sector, but then also kind of those technical skills that the sector is needing. We have actively engaged and invested in a series of hackathons within the province and across the prairies that is focused on exposing non-agricultural students and agricultural students as well to agri-food innovation thinking and key concepts within the sector, and then partnering with an industry partner to address a real challenge that they're facing in their business. So in October, we hosted the first of these series of hackathons, and we had companies like McCain, Nature United, which is a conservation organization, the Southeastern Research Farm, and TELUS Agriculture, and they were working with groups of students to hack challenges that they're facing in the business, which was a really rewarding experience because it allowed those students to learn those fundamentals, but then also get up in front of a panel of industry expert judges, including William from the Progressive Group, and we have Crookwood Farms and Jacqueline from Emily, and to provide feedback to students and kind of how those challenges and solutions that they came up with actually apply to the sector. So I think investing and engaging in those real experiences that allow students to flex those skills of yes, they may not come from a farm, or they may not have a deep understanding of the sector, but by working with industry, they can learn a little bit and then apply their education to the problem that they're talking about. And then complementary to that, we're also working with the Sustainable Food Systems for Canada, which is a network of 13 universities and colleges to develop a series of micro-credentials. And the approach that they're taking to those micro-credentials, there's lots of micro-credentials out there, but what they're trying to do is really take content that's already existing for the sector, understand what's already out there, and then build upon that with key themes that the sector is demanding. So, what the focus of those micro credentials will be is still being in development. So, encourage people to engage with Sustainable Food Systems for Canada to inform what those micro credentials are. But that's another direct way that we're trying to invest and engage in the sector and address that skills gap by providing training opportunities that the industry is demanding, but then also students who actually need to be ready for the workforce when they're ready to enter it.
Perfect. No, that's great. We'll stay with you, Lisa. In RBC's report, today we're talking about the skills gap, but RBC's report did have a section that focused on, innovation as well, and the role it plays. What role can the innovation process play in specifically addressing the technology skills gap?
So the agri-food innovation continuum and ecosystem is essential, I think, to advancing Canadian agriculture. It's developed products like canola, lots of tech and innovation, and partnerships across universities and industry. But when we dug into the data, just in terms of kind of the status of R&D in agriculture, what we found is that funding for the industry has flatlined over the last 10 years in real terms. So we're not seeing increases in funding, which is a challenge when we see kind of key competitors like Australia, even Japan, the EU, and the US increase their investment, their public investment into R&D. So that's one challenge. Another challenge that we acknowledged was that the ecosystem of institutions that are conducting R&D for the sector is shrinking. Over the last 5 years, it's shrunk by 29% in terms of the number of institutions that are conducting R&D. And when you look at kind of vibrant agri-food hubs, you really need a diverse group of institutions to be collaborating and working on that. So that's another key challenge. And then finally, what we found over the last 5 years is that private investment into university research has declined by 77%. So we're starting to see a little bit of a widening gap between academic institutions and the private sector in terms of research. And so those are some of the key challenges that we're observing, and something that we're now kind of doubling down on in terms of our focus, and how those challenges have come about. And then also how we think about competing with countries like the US, who, of course, their market size is so much larger, but what are really unique components of R&D within Canadians' agri-food sector that Canada can be building upon and really double down. So that's where we found somewhat of a negative trend, but I think kind of given the fact that Canada has a very strong agri-food production foundation, and a lot of opportunity to further expand into processing. There's lots of potential, but really finding where those sweet spots are is what we're focused on next.
Perfect. That's great. Chris or Gary, did you want to add anything to that related to innovation process or some of those approaches to addressing those skill gaps?
Yeah, I think like for us, like we run an applied research program here at Assiniboine College as well, but it's not basic research, it's industry driven. And so we find that that's actually been very well received and responsive, so that industry comes to us with their problem and we work with them to find a solution for them. And the beauty of it in our system is that it incorporates student learning. So the students have their own ability to contribute to these research projects and work with industry. So we hope and we feel that that really drives some of those skills gaps. It gives them a bit of an additional love of learning, exposure to the research world, connection with industry. And while industry gets an outcome based on their need, so do our students and adds value in that direction. And we've had great success in that. So I think Lisa's bang on when she's referring to the decline, but I think that's more around the basic research, which is certainly where the universities shine. But for us, we're pretty nimble, and we can usually adapt to what industry is willing to invest in because that's what they need. But that's further down the research chain as well. We're at applied stages and pre-commercialization. So there's kind of it's a wide ecosystem when you're talking R&D.
Yeah, perfect. And kind of on that thread, then, what have you observed industry doing to address these skill gaps? And maybe on that one, we'll start with you, Gary, because you are industry.
Sorry, repeat that question.
Yeah. What has industry been doing to address these skill gaps?
Yeah, so for us here, like I talked about, the apprenticeship program for technicians are our biggest demands. So, they do schooling, and there's, mentorship, hands-on learning that they do here. But, in our company, we've actually have two corporate trainers that, that's all they do is train now. Like our technicians, like hours and hours of training every year, whether that be online on their laptops. But, also, we have two internal trainers that's all they do is train, and whether that's technicians or parts or service, they're dedicated just for training, just because the technology is so advanced. There's become a need for even more and more training in our industry, and we don't see that changing. That'll continue to grow.
Perfect. Chris, have you seen anything, from industry? I know Assiniboine College works with a variety of industries.
Absolutely. I mean, case in point is John Deere. We partner with them, and we do add-on training to our apprenticeship programs and our ag technician program here, and they get the additional training on John Deere. And that's a great example of a partnership where industry is partnering with post-secondaries to help the sector at large, but certainly drive a little bit more focus and direction in their way, which is strategically smart and a win-win. But at a larger scope, most of our programs have a work integrated learning component. So in between semesters, their students are required to have a job placement that is within the realm of their sector, and we facilitate that and work with industry to find those connections. And we strongly believe and have had strong feedback from industry that this is a great opportunity for the students to learn more about the sector that they're trying to get into, learn kind of what they like and don't like about it. And it's a great opportunity for industry to see the talent that's coming down the pipeline. I think, agriculture in general has had a hard time selling itself as a great opportunity as a career path outside of the traditional primary production areas. And we've missed the boat in telling the story that agriculture can touch on pretty much every career path you can think of, whether that's engineering and law to communications and human resources and high finance. It can potentially touch agriculture in anything and everything you do. But we still need to have people think about it, that if you're graduating or have maybe past experience in a field that is not agriculture, those skills are quite potentially super transferable and needed in agriculture, because we're at a massive labor deficit. And we lose a lot of productivity in agriculture because of that. And we need to get that story in front of people that just because there's agriculture attached to it doesn't mean you aren't potentially qualified or you can't upskill in that direction in an accelerated fashion. So I think we have a lot of opportunity there, and we just really need to take it and run with it.
We also bring, large agricultural equipment to some of these colleges. So, when these apprenticeships are working or learning, it's not just classroom. They actually have equipment right in their facilities that they can do some hands-on training with. And we've also, Bill, we brought in some, we work closely with our local high school. We have a great partnership here. We bring students in. I never go speak in the school. I always bring them here because seeing has such a greater impact than just talking. And most people think, we sell and service John Deere equipment, which is true. But until you show them the technology and the precision agriculture, the digital insights that we use, that really opens their eyes to what's out there. And we had a tour of it wasn't even the automotive; it was a physics and science teacher that brought a class of 15 people through, and we just did a presentation on the agronomy side of the business that we did. And she told me just recently that four of those students were in university right now and didn't realize that that career was even available. So we just find success and just bringing an awareness. And to me, it's an hour a year. It's a 40-minute presentation and a 20-minute tour that I do at the school every year. So to me, it's really no time, but the impact on the students and how it's drawn them to agriculture has been very successful for us.
I think too, perhaps there's this, and maybe I'm incorrect, but I think maybe agriculture is just has a connotation that if you're not already connected to the sector, it's a bit exclusive or not attractive. But I just want to remind folks that a way that to bridge that sometimes, if that is the case, is to think about food.
Mhm.
Everybody loves food, and agriculture is really the first step in creating that food. So if you don't think about agriculture first off, I understand that, but it's hard not to think about food. So food is a really good gateway into a career in agriculture as well.
You're absolutely right, Chris. I often use the word food instead of agriculture because some youth don't understand what the word means, but everyone understands what food is, right? So it opens up their eyes and starts the conversation off differently.
We're in the business of food production.
Absolutely. Which I think leads into kind of the last question here. Then we'll go to some audience questions. Each of you, obviously within this webinar have explained kind of where your position, your organizations work within the agriculture sector. But what are a few of the characteristics of the agriculture sector that make it unique or even similar to other sectors as it relates to skill sets required to adopt new technology? And I think those similarities could be important, as we've talked about here, we need to bring people in that maybe don't come from the agriculture sector initially. Lisa, why don't we start with you?
Yeah, I think within agri-food, I agree with Chris and Gary in that back and forth. I think it is sometimes a challenging sector to bring people in, but food may be a good way to start the conversation. And in my office, I lead our agri-food work, but then there's also my counterpart who leads buildings, another leads energy, another leads transportation, another leads disruptive technologies. And we have our own verticals and how we would engage in these sectors. But I would say a lot of the challenges that our sectors that we work on face are very similar in terms of introducing and engaging talent with disruptive technologies like AI and integrating it, not necessarily thinking about it in a way of competition. Infrastructure investments and capital investments within the sectors. I think a lot of sectors struggle with that, but are described in different ways, and obviously pools of funds may be different between the sectors. And then things around like sustainability and Chris, you mentioned productivity, all of these key themes we see touching each sector. And so I think I was just speaking with someone from the food and beverage industry that often when, for example, the auto sector is describing kind of the impact of their sector and the scale of the importance to the economy, they bring it all the way down to people that are maybe washing the car, not necessarily building the car. And I think for agri-food, if we want to really better communicate how important the sector is to the economy and how important it is to Canada, is to really bring in more people that touch food, but maybe don't think about themselves in working in agri-food. And maybe that's not unique, but I think that's an opportunity for more people to be seeing themselves in the sector and bringing more of those skills that are peripheral and very important to building a prosperous sector in agri-food, but maybe aren't really thought of in that context yet. So I think that's a really big opportunity for us to be thinking about the broader impact of the sector and bringing more of those people in.
No, that's great. Gary, how about you? What makes it unique?
I often talk about the technician because that's our biggest demand. But if you
Mhm.
if you compare agriculture to the automotive, for example, both can be similar and unique. When you look at the skill sets, both require that analytical or problem-solving mindset, whether you're chasing electronics or the technology, both in cars and ag equipment. But what really makes it unique is, vehicles, have mostly the same technology across different vehicle types. Where in ag, we have, different machines that do different processes in the fields. And much of the technology is the same, but seeders, sprayers, and combines all have different function in the field. So as a technician, like you're not only having to know, some of the common technologies, but some of the ones that are just specific to that machine, and then you're working on that in spring, and then summer a different machine, and then in the fall it's something different, right? And even if you look at automotive with data insights that they use, you can go on your phone and you can see your tire pressure and your fuel levels and your vehicle health. Well, we have all that in agriculture, but also the machines are constantly sending agronomic data that's through the cloud, and the producers, they use this data to actually make better decisions going forward. Like they use what they've done and they improve on it. Then they're trying to grow more food with the same amount of land to feed the growing population, and we're doing that through the equipment, the technology, and the agronomy services, and all the data insights that comes with the technology in the equipment today.
Perfect.
I'm going
Good
to
points.
dovetail off of that,
Yeah.
Gary, because like that's so true. Now take it one step further and use. I'm going to carry on the analogy to kind of a household where you've got on the farm you've got all this equipment, and at home you've got, let's say, a Toyota truck, a Ford car, a Polaris ATV, um, maybe a motorcycle of some kind, and in an agricultural setting, that's different manufacturers are on the farm, and they all need to talk to each other because that red tractor talks to that green baler that talks to that blue implement, and the interoperability requirements for this data and for this knowledge to carry on is a huge challenge and a fun one to tackle. So that there's all this new innovation coming along with new manufacturers, new ideas, but they also need to integrate and talk to what's already established. So
Right.
that's going to be another big area that we're talking about. What are the skill sectors that's unique? I think that's fairly unique. You can have a car and a truck and a motorcycle at home, but they don't need to talk to each other.
Mm-hmm.
These need to talk to each other. They need to sync up and align. That combine and that grain cart need to be staying in position while they're tracking down a field that's slippery and wet and on a slope and what have you. It's super interesting to get into that. And having that mindset of curiosity and back to the problem solving and diagnostics and all that we've already talked about. But I think, there's skill sets and there's mindsets, and they're both needed. So that curiosity mindset, that continuous learning mindset, the ability to recognize and appreciate that in agriculture, you can work rural, you can work urban, you can work indoors, you can work outdoors. You can work with your head and your hands, or you can do all of them. It is such a great industry to be in because the world is your potential. And everything that we do here is done globally. This technology is global. The agronomics are global. There's different nuances to what you're doing in Australia and Brazil versus Canada and Ukraine, but the fundamentals are very similar. And so when you get into agriculture, it really is a global industry if you want it to be.
Perfect. I think that's a great way of selling the industry here and closing that part of the webinar out. We got a few minutes left. We got 5 minutes left, so I'm gonna pop into the chat for some questions here. Let's start with, we have one question. Which specific measurable skills do you expect a new hire to have on day one for farms using precision machinery, and who is responsible for certifying those skills? We'll open that up to whoever wants to take that.
Yeah, so if you talk about our industry, if we're talking about a technician, I take students straight out of high school that they've worked in the automotive, and you already know that they're analytical, right? And that's where it starts. Once we hire them, that's our responsibility to train them properly. And so that's done through, just the training, the online training that you do, going through the ACC college through those 4 levels. That's the mentorship. That's the one-on-one time with the journeyman technician in the shop, working side by side and learning as they go. And then, yeah, the hands-on learning, and they just, they have to get in there, and part of learning is doing. So, we recognize apprenticeships. It's going to take us longer to do a repair, and, we don't bill that time out to customers because that's part of their learning, right? So, it's our responsibility to, make sure that they're trained. And like I said before, once they graduate and get their red seal, they're just starting, because the equipment and the technology is advancing so much that you don't stop learning until the day you retire.
Perfect. Next question I have here. This one, I think, Chris, I don't know if you want to add anything there.
Oh, I was just going to pipe in quickly that, while there's, programs that take months or years to progress through, as you're kind of starting out on that career path, there's also the ability to be responsive with upskilling and reskilling courses, part-time programs, et cetera. So I think it's really about, being responsive to what the industry needs. So if industry just really needs, we've got existing employees and they need to focus on a particular skill set, like that's something that we can be responsive to and help industry out and be more proactive in that approach versus just always thinking that you need to have this multi-year credential.
Yeah, I think that's actually a good answer to one of the questions in the chat here of, how important is, say, virtual learning and programs for retaining and recruiting workers. It is those upskilling, right? Those micro credentials that, to Gary's point, these individuals are constantly learning.
Yeah, and maybe Bill, just on that point, part of our engagement in Manitoba, some feedback I think a lot of the financial sector has received is more demand for financial specialists to have an understanding of the agricultural sector and the farm business. And so that's something that RBC is actively investing and engaging in terms of kind of upskilling existing workforces so that they have that ag background, and recognizing that there's more and more people coming into the financial sector that don't have that ag background. It's now an opportunity to expose more people that are already in the workforce.
So a shameless plug for our Ag Fundamentals program, which does just that.
There you go. There you go. And I think that's really a good way of kind of closing out this webinar is that there are all these skills. Some of them aren't going to be coming directly from agriculture, but there are resources and programs available to make sure those individuals have some context of the sector to make sure they can succeed. And for those that are already in the sector, there is upskilling and additional training available for new technologies. So that is all the time we have for today. So thank you, Lisa, Chris, Gary, for your time and energy, and thank you to our listeners today for your attention, your questions, and your answers. A copy of this webinar will be made available on Manitoba Agriculture's YouTube channel for future viewing. Thank you all again, and have a great rest of your day.
Thanks very much for including us.
Thanks, everyone. Thank you for including us.